A routine maintenance check. A worker climbs down a ladder into a municipal sewer vault. At the bottom, without a sound or a struggle, he collapses. Up top, his partner sees him fall. Panic sets in. The immediate, overwhelming instinct is to lean forward, climb down, and pull him out. But in environments like this, that exact instinct is a death sentence. Why does a localized emergency involving a single person so reliably turn into a multi-fatality disaster? In these restricted environments, the natural impulse to save a life is the precise trigger for a much larger industrial catastrophe. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, the federal agency that regulates workplace safety, classifies these areas as permit-required confined spaces. These are places with limited entry and exit points, not designed for continuous human occupancy, that contain recognized safety or health hazards.
Lacking proper ventilation, stasis trap heavier-than-air toxic gases that pool at the bottom, pushing breathable oxygen out. A common killer is hydrogen sulfide, or H2S. It causes rapid olfactory fatigue, disabling your sense of smell until a single breath causes immediate unconsciousness, a one-breath knockdown. These spaces are exceptionally lethal because the threat is entirely invisible. It shuts down the human body faster than any reaction time allows for an escape. Back at our opening scenario, the second worker doesn't pause to test the air. He jumps into the vault to save his partner, takes one breath of that same trapped gas, and instantly collapses on top of him. This chart shows the fatality statistics for confined space accidents. According to federal safety data, over 60% of all confined space fatalities are the would-be rescuers. More people die trying to help than in the initial accidents themselves. Psychologists call this rescue altruism. When a coworker or family member is in sudden peril, empathy creates an overwhelming, irrational urgency to act. It triggers an action bias, a psychological compulsion that doing something, anything, is better than doing nothing. During a sudden emergency, a neurological override occurs. The amygdala, the emotion-driven center of your brain, flares up and takes complete control. At the exact same moment, the logic-driven prefrontal cortex goes dark, completely bypassing your ability to process hazards or recall safety training. Empathy effectively blinds the rescuer to objective reality. They fail to recognize that the exact same invisible hazard that just knocked down a coworker will incapacitate them just as quickly. We can see the devastating cost of this psychological trap in a 1989 incident investigated by NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. It took place on a typical dairy farm, a setting with a deceptive normalcy that masks lethal, localized hazards like manure pits. This diagram shows a timeline of the pit. First, a 28-year-old son climbed down into the 10-foot deep structure to replace a mechanical shear pin. He was instantly overcome by methane gas, a simple asphyxiant produced by decomposing waste, and fell to the bottom. Then the cascade began. A 15-year-old grandson climbed in to help and collapsed. A 63-year-old nephew followed, then a 37-year-old older son, and finally the 65-year-old dairy farmer himself. Each one entered in a panicked rescue attempt. Each one perished. Without engineered procedural barriers in place, an entire family was systematically wiped out in minutes by a single localized atmospheric trap. To override this fatal human rescue impulse, the Department of Labor enforces the OSHA permit-required confined spaces standard. This regulation forces a strict, mandatory pause between recognizing a problem and taking action. Before anyone breaks the plane of a confined space, the internal atmosphere must be tested using a calibrated, direct reading instrument. And it must be tested in a precise order, first for oxygen levels, then for flammable gases, and finally for potential toxic contaminants. The standard also requires a designated attendant, often called a hole watch, stationed at the entrance. Their absolute, non-negotiable primary duty is to remain outside the space at all times, no matter what happens inside. These protocols function as a psychological circuit breaker. By mandating a strict sequence of physical tasks, they remove human emotion and impulsive decision-making from the emergency response. This schematic illustrates a non-entry rescue system. Instead of sending another person into a dangerous atmosphere, the entrant wears a full-body harness connected by a high-tension lifeline to a mechanical retrieval winch stationed safely above ground. If the entrant collapses, the attendant simply cranks the winch. They can physically extract their coworker up and out of the hazard zone without ever breaking the plane of the confined space opening. Spontaneous, unprotected rescue attempts never save lives. They only multiply the victim count. The most heroic action you can take when a coworker collapses in a confined space is to stand your ground, follow the protocol, and call for a trained rescue team.